Hello, this is Alejandro and CJ from Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business, and welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Single TV, channel 250. Please remember to download both the Single TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is also available in Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV, Roku, and all the smart TVs. So here we are here with CJ. And we have a special guest that for me is very important. She is one of my mentors. So thank you, Bino, for connecting with us today. I know that today is going to be amazing. And we're going to have a lot of fun here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Pleasure.
So today, well, I know that we're going to be talking a lot about how you help with parents and parenting, and I really want to tell everybody this is key also in your life because if you are a business owner and you have family, if you are an entrepreneur, you have family. If and sometimes those areas in the family are more important because if they are not working well, suddenly everything is falling apart in your life, and that's why we are having today Vino because we really want to learn more about how to manage the things that we are going through and how to avoid the issues that we can go through when we are not managing that well. So thank you again, Vino, for giving your wisdom here with us today. The first part that we always start is a little bit about your story. I know that you already told me about that in another uh, show that we had, but today we will want to go like a little bit of who you are, where are you coming, where before you started to believe in yourself, who you were.
Yeah, so thank you. My story, I feel, is resonates with a lot of people. I grew up in America. I was the first generation. My family's from India, and I was first generation born in America. And growing up, with an Indian family in America, there was a lot of conflict, if you would, having the Indian culture in America, trying to adapt to the American culture. And, a lot of a person's identity gets lost already in that translation and trying to figure out, like, when I come home and I have these rules but they're not the same rules as my friends have, and not understanding, like, did I do something wrong? What's wrong with me? And then being bullied from the time I was little, like 6 years old, all the way through even adulthood. I mean, adults get bullied too. And it really had to do a lot with my skin color, about my nationality, because kids don't know, like, kids are ignorant about the different cultures. And if you're different gave you I guess, gave you the title of the scapegoat, right? Like, they had a reason to find the differences and tease you about it. And um, it became my inner voice. And so what they were saying about me, it just became my inner voice, and I believed it. And so at the age of 13, I became suicidal. And that was my kind of my, when we say, what's your mantra? My mantra every day is, God, why am I still alive? Like, if you love me, you'll let me, you won't let me wake up tomorrow. And, I was one of those statistics. They say 60,000 kids won't go to school today, not because of coronavirus, but because they're afraid of being teased. And, and that was me. I was that statistic. I'm trying to, oh, I'm not feeling good. I don't want to go today. And just not being able to feel heard or seen. I felt very lonely. And at the age of 15, the contemplation of suicide became reality for me. And I tried to take my life, and I ended up in a hospital. I was self-harming, just trying to numb the pain that I was feeling so deep inside. And, looking back, my the tribulations became my triumph. Like, it became my everything. I didn't know that I had to go through all of that to be who I am today. And there's no regrets. There's no regrets, because now I'm able to, like, I started off understanding about bullying, self-harm, and suicide, and I was going all over the country talking at schools and helping kids to get their self-worth, because that's what it came down to, is self-worth and identity and self-love. But I'm going to tell you, one of the things that our kids right now are not understanding is self-worth. And we talk about it, but I always tell my families that, if you've never seen what a rose is, and I said, close your eyes, imagine a rose. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? And you've never seen a rose. How do you know? How are you going to describe it? Well, that's the same thing we're telling kids when we're saying, hey, you got to believe in yourself. You got to have the self-worth. Where's your self-worth? Where's your confidence? Kids like don't even know what that looks like or feels like, that they don't know anything about it. And so what I realized, my epiphany was several years ago going through a program that my mentor Tony Robbins has. Um, it just kind of changed everything, and it was all about the beliefs that I had established. And what I realized is everything I went through was for a reason. It's now, why am I able to connect with kids when therapists can't? It's because I'm asking them the questions that no one asked me. I'm giving them an opportunity to feel safe, to trust me, and to have an open space to tell me anything without judgment. And instead of insinuating that I know what's going on, instead of understand like, oh, I know, I've been there, I know what you're feeling. No, I don't know what they're feeling. I know what I felt, and then there's that connection to help guide them. And I have 6 kids personally. My oldest is 28, and then I have a 23-year-old. My stepdaughters are 17 and 14, and then my current husband and I, we have 9-year-old twins, a boy girl twin, and I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. So I get to see the whole gamut of what happens. Being a parent child coach, I'm not just coaching on what I think is going to happen because I have a child that's 10, 12, or 5. I'm coaching on the fact that I know what the outcome is if we are coaching through our old baggage of
Mm.
no self-worth, no self-esteem, anger, what we think parenting is because the way we were parented. My children, my adult children are now trying to figure out their self-worth and self-esteem. And because I parented by punishing, I parented by grounding, I parented by, yelling. I never spanked my kids. That wasn't one of the things that me and my ex-husband believed in, but I was definitely that yeller. And I didn't realize like that too became their internal voice, that they're not good enough because I had such an expectation for them. And and that's what I'm here to teach parents. I'm here to teach them to be curious, not critical. And I'm also an entrepreneur. And what I've realized is that, why do us entrepreneurs work so hard and to make all this money and to give our kids this great life, when what our kids really want, they want us. They want our time. They want our presence. Like
Mm.
we're working to leave them a legacy of what? Of work and disconnection from us, because we don't really know our kids don't really know us, because they don't feel they're worth it, because all our worth is worth working. So that's kind of like a gist of my story of where I was and how I got to do what I'm doing today.
No, and it's very interesting, and I like a lot of the things. But let me ask you something, because I know that maybe a lot of the people that is listening to us today is more in the parent side, but of course there is like a lot of people here at the same time. If anybody has any question, just put it in the chat, or go to our social media, and you can be connecting with us and having any question that you can have with Vino. In my side, I want to ask you something, because you went. I know that from your story, you went from like being suicidal to like even thinking about that, like 3 years or 4 years maybe. But you also told me in another time that I know about that your parents didn't have a clue that you were thinking that, and you didn't. So why you think that happens, and how we can avoid that as parents? Like, okay, there are some things. Of course, you would need to be with them more time, and that is part of why we are parents. But sometimes there are some things that are happening in our lives that we need to be like, okay, if we don't work, we don't have food, and then we can eat or whatever. So how are how I start to feel like there are some things that are affecting us, that we need to check, like, okay, he's becoming suicidal and I don't have a clue what is happening. How I can start to see those things.
Right. Those are great questions, Alejandro. So I was suicidal for 21 years. And when I did not feel like, I remember there's one time I went to my mom and I said, these kids, like, I hate Gandhi. They're teasing me about it. And I didn't really know who Gandhi was or anything at the time. And my mom oh, kids will be kids, because that's what we thought. We just thought every kid goes through teasing. We all go through teasing. What she didn't realize is that all that I had compassed previously to this time when I was 13, that it had just stacked. And so, but she would never see it, because when she was home, I mean, my mom is my hero. She worked 2 jobs. She went to law school. She put herself through this as a single mom. And so she did the best she could with what she had. But so when she saw me, I was watching TV, I was going outside playing with my friends, but she didn't know the internal thing that was going on in me, like that internal voice, like, why are you here? You're not even worth it. Like, for what? Why do you want to be here, just to get up and go through this again? Because I did not feel that she did hear me. And, I was in therapy, and like all therapists wanted to do was like, oh, give her medicine, she's going to be okay. All kids go through this. It's hormonal. And, some of the kids that I work with right now, it's the society thinks that, it's going to be, oh, they're going to withdraw. They're going to stay in their room. They're not going to talk to people. And then, oh, I know my kid's depressed. That's not true. Matter of fact, I have a client right now on my caseload who's 14 years old. She stays in her room. She loves to write. She writes beautiful short stories. She doesn't have any friends, but she does yoga. She does aerial. She does like all these things, but she's happy. Like, and you know what? Happy is not even her emotion. Like, we want our kids to be happy. What if our kids don't want happy? What if we just need to ask our kids, if you don't want to be sad, what do you want to be? Because when I asked this in particular client, she's like, I just want to feel peace. I want to feel calm. And I'm like, well, what would that look like to you? And she says that I'm accepted for who I am, and I'm not always being asked, are you depressed? She says, I'm not depressed. And so we sit here and we put these things in our children's head because we think that we create this definition of what we're seeing versus asking. And that leads us to what we're talking about today, being curious, not critical. So, I know a lot of kids that put on those masks just like I did, and that are cheerleaders, that play sports, that have a lot of friends, and they're still lonely. So, how are parents supposed to know? We have got to create the conversation. We have got to get into the mode of asking questions, not just yes, no questions, not just how was your day? Oh, it was good. Okay, great. What do you want for dinner? It's tell me what was great about your day. If you had one magic moment today, what would that be? Is there anything going on in your life that I can support you on? And create the dialogue with your kids. Teach them about leadership and what does leadership look like. If they were a leader in their day, what would that have looked like? What would they lead somebody to? Teach them about compassion and empathy.
Mm.
And then we would not have the world that we're living in where so many kids are suicidal. Like, that is my mission, is to stop kids from being suicidal, to know their worth. And the only way we do that is to get curious. So to answer your question, that was long-winded, is just we have to get curious and ask the questions if we're going to know what's really going on with their kids. If we're looking for signs and symptoms, we're going to miss them.
And okay, just to finish that, because I agree and I like a lot of what you are doing and saying exactly. But sometimes, okay, once again, another question that can come, like how much time is needed to give that space and that conversation. I know that it depends on the person, but what is your experience right now that at least like you have, maybe you are very busy, but you have quality time and that is enough, that quality time of having 30 minutes that you are really talking with them. What is your experience on that? What is better? In order to give them the space to have the dialogue and to talk and to understand and everything that they are going through.
So, it's not feasible to say, well, if I work 8 hours, I got to give my kid 8 hours. Like, none of us are going to be able to do that, right? There's not enough time a day to do that, especially when our kids are going to school. They have extracurricular activities after school and whatnot. But kids are not looking for a time limit. They're looking for your presence.
Mm,
They're looking for us to put this down and to really focus on what they're saying and to create the dialogue. You know, when a child is acting out, think about how much time we take off from work. We're going to school conferences, we're giving them all that attention. But when they're being great, if you would, everything's great. I don't have to worry about it. I can keep working then. I don't have to take time off from work to give it to them, right? And then we wonder why kids have these behaviors. It's like they're searching for something. Every behavior we have, every single behavior, whether you're a child or an adult, it's because it's communication. We're communicating something through our behavior,
Mm.
and we're either wanting attention, we're wanting to be seen, we're wanting to be heard. And so there's really not a time limit you can give. The time that you need to give is the time that that child needs. And I also talk about like taking off the labels. Like there's so much, oh, I'm a mindful parent, I'm a conscious parent. We have so many titles that we're trying to reach that standard of what that definition is. And when we don't do that, we feel like we're a failure as a parent. So many of us already feel like we're failures as parents. Like I'm sure some of your listeners are out there are like, yep, I get it. I know I felt like a failure as a parent.
Mm.
Me, a parent coach, feels like a failure as a parent at times. So can you imagine trying to reach that level of that title? So take the titles off and be that parent your child needs to be, and ask them, what is it? If I could be a better mom to you, what would that look like? If I could be a better dad to you, what would that look like? They're going to tell you their formula just by that one question.
Wow, that is huge. We have another person here asking how to deal with your teens when they start to date. You don't want them to date.
So, it's interesting. I have a 12-year-old on my caseload, and she um, got a boyfriend, and I was her coach. So I was the first one she told, and then I'm like, do you feel like it's something that you need to share with your mom? And she was kind of hesitant. And when she finally shared it with her mom, she wanted to go somewhere with him, and her mom's like, oh, I'm sorry, she turned 13. She's like, you want to date at 13? And to me that was unheard of, right? Like in my era, I grew up in the 80s, like 70s and 80s, dating did not even come to even a thought until we're like 16, 17. So
Yeah.
here she's 13, and like, so again, as a coach, I got to take my values and throw them out the window, because what I want, I'm not her
No
parent. It's not
matter.
my choice. So I had to, we talked to mom about it, and I said, how do you feel about that? And she says, I think 13's too young. If she wanted to go with a group of friends, I would feel okay with that. Like if they all wanted to go bowling or play putt-putt golf or something like that, like I would be totally okay with that. But if it's just one-on-one that she wants to go and meet him before school at the Starbucks, I'm not okay with that yet. And I said, so what age would you be that? Would you be okay? And she says, I think after she turned 14. Okay, then now we have mom's value, and what that would look like. And she says, of course, there would be boundaries. I would want to be public and whatnot. So I would ask you, if how to deal with your teen when they start dating is create a space where you have open, trusting, and safe communication with your child. Because if they know you're not going to judge them, they're going to give you more information. The more information you have, the less stories you will create about what's happening with your child. Because we all do that. Think about it. When we were a teenager and you liked somebody and they didn't call you, what stories were you creating in your mind? And
Mm.
then all of a sudden you found out is that, oh, they lost their phone. And so they couldn't call you and they had no way to reach you. Right. And so our brains do that though. When we're not getting the satisfaction of what we want, we're going to create a story of to rationalize what's really happening when we don't even know all the facts. So, I would probably ask more questions about how to deal with your teen when they start dating. Is what specifically do you need to deal with? Do you need to deal with setting boundaries with them? Do you need to deal with the conversation because of their age? Do you need to deal with who they want to date? Like there's a lot of other questions that I would probably want to ask. But the most roundabout answer I can say is, how are you creating that open and safe and trusting space to have that conversation with them so they don't feel judged, they don't feel blamed, they actually feel seen and heard, and they trust you to guide them in the right direction?
Okay, and I believe that leaves us exactly with what we were talking about. The title for this program today is it was like give your kids a childhood that they won't have to heal from.
Yes.
And I want to go deeper on that because I believe that is very powerful. Uh, and you already started to talk a little bit about that. Like we are always trying to lead in our businesses, in everything that we are doing through our wounds. So how you start to do that with your kids? How much I need to be focusing on myself to really change myself to start to help them? How that works?
So, the reason why that is my title of about whatever I do, is because everything I'm teaching is healing the wounds that your children may or may not be establishing as a child through parenting, through what they're going through school, through their own stories they create. Because I look at how many adults now are still carrying the baggage of the wounds of the poor me, the victim, like, oh, I was bullied, or, I was this, I was that, I've had this trauma in my life. When I was a kid, my family's house was burnt down and I felt I have this fear of being homeless now, like whatever it is, right? There's still that trauma that they hold on to. And so if we now were able to raise our children with knowing their worth, knowing that they have that open, safe, and trusting space to communicate, that the criticism isn't there. We're not critical, we're curious. Would they have those wounds throughout their whole childhood? So when they're an adult, they had to start trying to figure it out. I think not. If I had somebody to help me understand that, you know, being bullied wasn't like they didn't like me. It was kind of their way of just kind of being curious, like, why is she brown and we're all white? Like, what do you mean she's Indian? Like, because we had no Indians at our school, right? So, but there was nobody there to help me or help those kids understand. There was nobody to say, it's okay to be brown and it's okay to be different. And, you're going to be okay. And let me show you how you're going to be okay. Let me tell you why you're worth it.
Mm.
What if I would have grown up with an ounce of worth? What would my life be like now? And, I want to go back to one thing you said, when I said that my mom did not know at the time. It wasn't until I came out with my book. I was asked to be in a book, Bully Proof, Unleash the Hero Inside Your Child. And I was the first chapter. And I remember that day my mom read the book and I was so hesitant to give it to her because in our culture, you don't put your dirty laundry out there. Like you just keep everything to the past. You don't talk about it. And she's like, I need to see your book. Like, when are you needing your book? And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to give her my book. She's going to know my whole past. And so finally she's like, I need your book today. So I gave her my book and we were taking a drive the next day to Costco, love Costco. And she put her hand on my leg while I was driving. And she says, I never knew. I'm so sorry. I never knew. And she was like crying. And so I was crying. And I said to her, and I'm like, thank God you didn't know, Mom, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if you knew, because that would have changed my whole trajectory. Right. And my trajectory was exactly the way it needed to be. Mm. Because if not me, then who? Who's going to understand what these kids are going through? One of my clients that was a cutter, she was in therapy and the parents were kind of hesitant, like, do I really need a coach if she's in therapy? And I said, well, just get her on a call with me. Let's just see what it looks like. And I now coach her and she no longer goes to therapy. And she told me, she goes, I tell you more. And she goes, I don't get it. Like, I tell you so much more than I tell my therapist. And I don't even understand why I tell you that. And I said, perhaps you feel safe with me. And she goes, yeah, I feel safe. She felt safe enough to tell me why, because I've been there. I've walked through those shoes for different circumstances, but we still wore shoes. And so it's important that we're not also doing everything for our children. We have to allow them to grow. We have to allow them to fall and be their cheerleader and guide them to get up instead of always lifting them up, if that makes sense.
Okay, I know that CJ is exactly with kids, and maybe he's not asking some questions because of that, but I know that you also help a lot with relationships and connection with, because this is like a three-way, like it's you with your wife and your wife with your kids and the kid with you. So it's like in all directions. So when we start to talk about relationships, how do you see that? How the wounds can be a problem also in the middle of that relationship? How you start to fix those type of things?
Are you asking me or CJ? I'm sorry.
No, I am asking you in the meanwhile because I want to give CJ the opportunity to continue asking in the relationships because he's in one right now, so he's maybe thinking about that, and I know that he wants to have kids also. So for him, it's going to be also important this thing that we're talking here.
Okay, so
I think maybe I clarify that a little bit, even to say, the things that we've gone through as children as we unpack that as adults, how do we not project those things, whether it be onto others, friendships, relationships, or as you're saying, Veena, with your children? So how do we unpack that? I have some ideas. I mean, I've been unpacking a lot of things lately, so going through all the emotional unpacking, it's a very important work, a deep work to do. But how do you go? How would you suggest going through that, seeing that you're dealing with children who have gone through some of the things that you've gone through, but even as adults, going back and saying, okay, I've dealt with suicidal tendencies, or I've dealt with suicide ideation, or I've dealt with, cutting or whatnot. Now, how do I no longer do it, but how do I work through those things, dig into that so that that doesn't get projected? Maybe you
Right.
could back some of that.
And thank you, because that's such a great question. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, I have that metaphor is put your baggage down, right? Put the baggage down and parent through fresh eyes. Don't parent through your parents' eyes. Don't parent through what you envisioned parenting was going to be, to really connect with your kids. So, like, for me, unpacking would be what created my wound. Let me get to the cause of it. Let's, like, not, I don't want to focus on all the effects of the wounds, because the cutting, the suicidal tendencies, that's all effects.
Mm-hmm.
But what was the cause? What was creating that emotion for me to want to escape? Because that's all those are our releases and escapes and exit plans, right? What would have to happen for me not to have those exit plans and releases? I would have to deal with the wounds, and the wound was not feeling enough, not knowing my worth. So if I know that was true, the reason why I parent my twins differently now, and the best compliment I get is from my adult kids, are like, "Oh, you parent them so differently." And I'm like, "Thank God." Thank God I do. But like you, CJ, I had to do a lot of unpacking. I had to heal what was not working for me in my life. I had to deal with the, um, why don't I feel I'm enough? Where's my worth going to come from? I didn't even like me, let alone love me. But again, I didn't even know what that looked like or felt like. So what if I did? I just didn't know, because I never knew what that felt like, right? And so, like, there's different strategies that I give families, especially like for kids that don't understand self-worth or self-love. So I start asking them questions like, tell me somebody in your life that means a lot, that's worth a lot to you. And most of these kids will say, my mom or my dad. Okay, what makes them worth it to you? So I start giving them ideas of, if that's what makes your mom worth it to you, what makes you worth it to yourself? That's like boundaries, chores, curfews, saying no. No, because it's dangerous or blah, blah, blah. It gives those kids, like, you loved me enough to say no to me. You loved me enough to give me a curfew. You loved me enough to say, you need to know how to clean a bathroom and do dishes, because you're going to be an adult. Like, for me, my whole outcome for my children is happy, healthy, and independent. So if I already know that's what I want for my children, what do I need to do to support that in going forward in their life? And the wounds, we have to heal our wounds first before we can even imagine, because if not, we are parenting through our wounds. That's exactly what I did with my older kids. So, I mean, you've said it, specifically, you got to unpack your own first, unpack that luggage so it's no longer there, and you have fresh eyes to parent your children through.
So, Vino, at what point did you yourself find yourself unpacking some of those things? Like, where along your journey? Because, we started out saying, okay, this is where I started out, but where along the journey did you start to say, hey, how can I unpack this? What was there a catalyst that really kind of pointed this out to you? And how did you start to deal with
So,
that?
yeah, I touched on a little bit. It was going to my first Tony Robbins event in 2007, and I went through all his events. I had no money to go through it, so I was like, everything was on credit card and everything at the time. But I knew that what I learned in that one event and what I shed and what I saw was the reason why I was on that trajectory was because of my belief systems. And it wasn't until then I really understood self-worth. I didn't understand gratitude until then. And you can't be depressed and grateful at the same time. And
Hmm.
so that was actually a catalyst. So I went through all his programs, his leadership programs, became senior leader. Now I'm a trainer for him. And I speak on his stages now and teach his content to, some of his participants. And but it showed me that whole trajectory of starting down here and just going up and up and up. And there's always another level. Like, now I'm the instructor for Joseph McClendon's Neuroencoding Institute, where actually I met Alejandro. And how did I get there? It's because I started to believe in me. I started to know, I started to walk the talk. And so it just is a trajectory. And I don't stop learning. Like, I'm in different programs, I'm in different areas, like I'm learning all the time. And I used to say, oh, I'm a professional learner. No, because I'm a professional action taker too. What I learn, I take action on. And when you take action, you get progress. And when you get progress, you get happiness.
Hmm.
So that has been my formula since 2007. Learn, action, progress, happiness. And, and sometimes you don't even realize the progress you got from what you did 3 weeks ago until it just shows up. You're like, oh, that's why I did that 3 weeks ago. So the other thing is like celebration. Like, if we are not going to celebrate ourselves, who's going to celebrate us? As entrepreneurs, I think we forget that because we're always like, oh God, that's so great that I did that. What's next?
Yeah.
Or like, what's next? What's next? Right? It's that hunger for what's next in that entrepreneurial mind. Well, we're forgetting to celebrate our bigs or our smalls, how our kids are. Like, our kids, that's one thing that I learned also, is teach my kids to celebrate. They are worth celebrating. When they made that goal in soccer, that's worth of celebration. When you brought home that C that you tried so hard and you got a C, it's worth celebrating because your efforts are worth celebrating. You are worth celebrating. When you did all the dishes and I didn't ask, you're worth celebrating. Because, and this is how, these are like little seeds that I plant, but they're worth it. If I keep, doing my job and I'm like, just a second, and that second never comes, in their mind, I'm planting the seed. Well, they're worth it to my mom, but apparently I'm not worth it to my mom because she can't even give me that second she told me. That's why follow through and consistency with parents is so important when we're talking about worth. Your kids are worth following through. Your kids are worth you being consistent. And that just stacks along the way too. So yeah, it's been that trajectory since 2007, and I'm constantly learning and doing.
That's amazing. Yeah, appreciate that. I'm wondering about along the way, because you hit on this point, and I think you say, okay, as kids, you got to teach that, and maybe along the way we didn't learn that. But I wonder where not celebrating actually short circuits that happiness piece, the number 4 piece. I wonder, if we don't celebrate, because I noticed with myself, I published a poetry book recently, and I just like, yeah, okay, I got the box of books, I put it over here, and then next, and so like I see myself doing it, and so it's the unpacking that as well. So I wonder where you might see that in kids, and where you might say, okay, now how do we shift this?
Well, I think that we grow up saying, don't be boisterous, don't brag about yourself, like, don't be conceited, don't be selfish. And so instead of teaching our kids, yes, celebrate, you got that A, be like, woohoo, I got the A. Even if you're the only A in the class, why can you not celebrate it? Why do you need to dim your light instead of shine it bright? But we as teachers teach that. We as adults teach that. Like, I remember growing up and my grandmother always said, don't be so loud. Don't be so loud. You don't need to be overexcited. So what did that teach me? That, okay, being overexcited is not good. So don't be loud. Don't talk, just smile. And so how did I learn how to celebrate? And it's more than just, oh, you did a good job, CJ. You did a good job. Versus, CJ, oh my gosh, you published your first poetry book. Good for you. That is amazing. That is so great. Congratulations on that journey you took. I mean, that probably feels so much better to you than just, good job, CJ. I'm so proud of you. For what? Be specific with these kids. We need to teach them, if they can't be their own raving fan because they're worth it, then how are they going to be a raving fan to anyone else? I got married at a very young age, at 18, against my mom's better judgment of letting me. Like, she's like, no, don't do it. I'm like, I'm 18. You can't tell me what to do. I'm escaping this life because I was looking for someone to love me because I didn't know how to love myself. And I probably should have divorced a long time before I did, but I didn't want to be a statistic. I did not want to be a statistic of getting married young, having kids, and I was a single mom now. So I stayed in that relationship, and I'm so grateful for him giving me my two most beautiful, amazing boys. And what I realized is I continue to just always try to escape that. I'm like trying to find, why am I worth it? Why am I worth it? What's love? But I'm going to tell you, once I really figured it out and I really knew my worth, I met the most amazing man who's my soulmate now. And we've been together for over 11 years now. And he I was able to receive his love authentically because I was able to receive my own love. And that was a huge pivot for me.
Wow, that is powerful. And maybe we can continue with a little bit because you are talking a lot about the like nuggets from your story. So how was that process? Because sometimes when you are living, like, okay, I need to get out of this relationship, and of course there is always some great things that happens because of that relationship, but at the same time you think like, okay, you are a failure because of that, you don't want to continue doing that anymore, and the first thing that you think is like, okay, I'm never going to be married again because of. So I know that those, even just by saying that, is something that is like going to your subconscious, like, okay, you never could find somebody that is going to love you again. So how are those type of things really start to stack again in your life, and how you start to change that in your life?
Well, I think that when you don't love yourself, well, first of all, I didn't really know I didn't love myself because I didn't know if I didn't know what it was, right? But what I realized is when I would get into abusive relationships with men, with my first husband, with my boyfriends after that, if I loved myself and I knew I was worth it, I would never let a guy lay a hand on me. Like it'd be a non-negotiable in my life right now, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that it happened and I stayed, and it happened and I stayed, and I made excuses of why I needed to stay because I rather, in my mind, my irrational mind in that moment was I rather stay and feel like somebody wants me than be all alone again. Because being alone that I had felt my entire life was the worst feeling ever.
Mm,
And, you can have many people around and still feel alone, you know, because you're not seen, you're not heard. And at the time when I was in that relationship with my ex-husband, like I did not in my mind, I didn't think I needed to leave earlier. It was after the fact. It was after I realized that, wow, like if I loved myself and I had my own worth, am I worth being more than just that my ex-husband or my ex-boyfriends or whatever? And I am worth that. I just
mm,
didn't know it at the time. And that was like a huge aha moment for me. Is like my husband now is so not like any other guy I've ever dated, ever. But why? Because I, like CJ said, did all the unpacking, right? Like I unpacked it. And even when I first got with my husband, I was still growing. I was still like, to have worth was all new to me, but at least I had it. At least I was able to identify it, and at least I was aware.
mm,
And that's like the biggest nugget I can give people is, are you worth it? And how do you test it? Test it. So if your best friend who you love and adore was in your position, what would you tell them? If you're telling them to get the heck out, don't walk, run because they're worth it, and they're just they don't even see that they're, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, being beat up, then yourself that you're not seeing it yourself then. Like your worth is that. And that's how I started testing things. Like if that was my child, what would I tell them?
mm.
And I'm like, "Oh, wow." Because especially for a parent, we may not know our worth, but we know our worth of our children, right? They're the ones that we
Yeah.
love unconditionally no matter what they do. I mean, you have a kid when they're born and they poop all over you, throw up all over you, and you still love them. You still love them. So,
Yeah.
they're worth it, right? So if you're not going to allow them to stay 1 second in that situation, why are you allowing yourself to stay in that situation?
And what here I know that we can continue talking about the healing, because for example, when finally you decide, I'm going to leave this guy, I'm going to be alone by myself, but I have two little kids, or and then it starts this question like, okay, but that is the best thing for them, and maybe I have to stay here because of my kids and they need to have two parents and not only one. And you start to have all those discussions inside of your head, and you don't want to create wounds in them. So how do you unpack that also, like to really?
I didn't do it the right way. I mean, I probably created more wounds in my kids when I went through it because, again, I was carrying a full luggage of no worth, no self-esteem, no love. Like that was my baggage. And I carried it in my marriage. I carried it out of my marriage. I carried it through most of the raising of my children. And so, you know, the final straw for me though, because ironically through all of this, I was a mental health provider and I was a mental health professional. So I knew that staying in a relationship with the constant fighting and whatnot was not great for my kids. And so I said, staying for my kids would be the biggest harm I can do for my kids. So that was my strength to get out. And I was living for my kids, you know, what I want parents to do is not live for their kids. I want you to live for you. Live for you first
Hmm.
because your kids they're going to get the bonus of you when you live for you first.
Mm,
That's like when we talk about life balance is self. Self is in there. We can't run off fumes. We have to run off energy because you want to give your kids your energy. You don't want to give your kids the leftover fumes.
mm,
And so that was the first key is like once I realized, and it took a long time to realize that I was worth it and that I loved me and you know and like seeing my blind spots where I can grow. But at the time when I left my husband, I had no idea about personal development, personal growth. I mean, I was in therapy, but all that did was just help me process the feelings that I had and validate that what I was feeling was what I was feeling. It never helped me to establish that, you need some self-worth and you need to love yourself. And let me tell you what that's going to look like. And if you wanted to feel this way, what would you need to do? Like there was no questions to take me from where I was at to where I wanted to go. And to be honest, I didn't know where I wanted to go. I just thought if I was alive, I'm doing good. Just I was kind of flatlined you
wow.
know? And I was waiting for my kids to be old enough so I could take my life. I was waiting for them to be 18 because in my irrational thinking, I thought, well, once they're 18, they won't go back to my ex-husband. I've done my job raising them. They don't need me. Little did I know that they probably need me more as adults than they did even growing up, right? And I'm so proud of myself for having the courage, for having the discipline to step out of what I thought my life was and to create what it is today.
Mm. That is very powerful. And quick question: let's start to go to the thing that you are doing now. You are doing a lot of things, but tell us a little bit in this part of relationships and working with parents and kids and helping them, and why you see that that is really key. Because you have been unpacking that during the whole session today, but also even for the parents that maybe they are having, okay, I have to have a successful business, and how I do, like I need to deal with the two things at the same time. So what are the things that you are doing now to help them to really realize that they can have both, they can have a very successful life and at the same time a very successful business?
Right. So, what I do is I really help a lot of entrepreneurs realize that as successful they feel in business, they can feel as successful in their parenting
Mm,
and to help them redefine that. Like, my whole redefine parenting is about look at your parenting and say, is this building up my kids or is it taking away from them? Is it helping me be a better parent and better guide? Like we are the guides. Our kids need to be the heroes, right? How do we guide our kids? Like I always think of like Don Miller's story brand. Like, as coaches, we need to be the guide, not the hero. Our clients need to be the hero. Well, with parenting, I just take it a step further is we are the guide. We're the Mr. Miyagi's and our kids are the Danielsons, right? Like, how are we going to make them the hero of their own story? And how can we be the best guide? And a lot of parents, and I'm going to be honest because I'm one of those parents, transparency is everything, is I thought if I was successful and making good money, that my kids would be happy. And I thought that was being a good parent. But when I go back and ask, would you rather had all the money and all the stuff, or would you rather have time with me? They rather have time with me.
Mhm.
Like, that's what they want. So we got to get curious and not critical. And that's what my coaching does. My team, I have, people that coach with me that, all of the coaches in my company, we do it the same way through quality questions. Um, I have programs where I actually move in with families for 4 days called the in-home turnaround. So, it's like a 4-day intensive where I come in and we just turn everything around to get what you really want. So you don't have to suffer with what you have.
Mm.
And and then of course the Neuroencoding Institute with Joseph McClendon, I'm the instructor there. So I'm teaching other coaches how to be that great coach to create to end suffering, right? If we can create coaches to not lead people into what they think, but get into their model of the world and ask the quality questions so the changes are sustainable. How beautiful is that?
Mm.
So, so yeah, so those are a few things that I'm dabbling, I would say dabbling, right? But I'm constantly busy. And of course, being a mom to 6 kids and a grandparent to my beautiful granddaughter.
Wow.
CJ, do you have anything else to ask Ginu?
No, I mean, I'm just kind of blown away right now. Just like with all of your achievement, maybe one thing I would ask is how do you prioritize, going through your day with all of these things? Because there's so many amazing things that we can do. Obviously, each thing that you've mentioned is deeply connected to a passion, whether it be from a pain or something that's created pleasure in your life. How do you prioritize and how do you stack yourself up? How do you stack these things up so that you're consistently winning? Because obviously it's clear, we talk about believe in yourself, believe in your business, you embody that. So how do you stack up life so that you're consistently doing that?
So I used to think success meant that I was making 7 figures. I based everything off of the dollar or how many clients I get to serve. And that definition did not set me up to win. It kept me in, I'm not good enough. And so it was a constant battle of that self-worth. And so I have amazing coaches myself. I have 3 coaches. And one of my coaches said, what if you change the rules about what success means? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she says, what if you changed your rules about success so you could set yourself up to win? What would that look like for you? And I said, I don't know. She goes, so let's just take it day by day. What would you need to do to be successful today? I said, finish everything on my calendar. She goes, great. So what I'm hearing is that if everything on your calendar is done for the day, you're successful. I said, yep. And that's been my protocol for the last 5 years. And for 5 years, I've been very successful every
Well,
day.
So how do you ensure that the right things then, maybe this is another way to state it, how do you ensure that the right things end up on your calendar? Because I think, there's so much talk today about people living lives of smoldering discontent because their calendars are full, but their hearts are not. So any insight into that?
So I would say to anybody out there with organization, like I'm a big chunker. Like I chunk things, right? Like my kids, my business, myself, and certain things are priority. And so if I know whatever's priority, that's the first thing I schedule is my priority. And I mean, hopefully at this point people know what priorities are in their life. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you know what a priority is. So, if this is like for me being on this podcast, it was a priority. I mean, weeks ago, I put it in my calendar. And with the time changes, I think I've had like 5 different text messages back and forth to Alejandro just from the certainty, like, okay, I'm going to be on time, right? But that's what I'm saying. That's a priority. So I have already calendared it. Every month I go through what's a priority. What's a priority to me is I get 2 massages a month. I take 2 days a month. I go and I get myself a massage and a facial because that is my time to recharge. And I had to learn that a year ago. I'm like, I go on vacation and I get massages. I don't need to go on vacation and get a massage. I'm worth it. I am worth taking that hour and a half in the morning. So every month I schedule that out first because that's a priority to me because I can't give you what I don't have. So that's how I schedule my schedule is that the first thing I do is I get my priorities out and then everything else follows.
Amazing.
So I love everything that you have, and I know that I will be like asking you more questions, a lot of questions here, especially because I have two little ones, one of a 4 and another of 2. So I am very curious of all the things that you are saying here. But I would like to ask you if somebody at the end was like, you gave a lot of nuggets during the whole program. What are maybe one or two things that you can say, like, okay, if you want to, maybe you listen to everything and now you feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I have to take care about a lot of things. But if you want to start to have a better relationship with your kids and start to understand them better, what is maybe one thing that you can tell them, okay, forget about everything that we talk, but focus on this area, and then everything starts to follow up exactly in the area that it's going to be.
So I just did a master class on this 2 weeks ago, I think. And forget everything I said today. If you do this one thing, be curious, not critical with your children, with your partners, with your
Mm,
business partners, you will win.
mm,
You will win.
good.
Curiosity is asking a question. Critical is knowing and making a statement.
Mm,
It's blaming, it's shaming. Curiosity takes all of that away.
mm,
And stay away from the word why. Why did you do that? Your brain automatically goes to defensiveness and they're going to create a story, maybe the truth, maybe the lie. But if you say to them, huh, what in the world happened here? What would make you do that? Oh my goodness. And you come in a neutral tone and you're using the what, you know, or the how, kids are going to be more open. They're going
mm,
to trust you more because you're not going to be critical. So
mm.
curious, not critical. And I have a Facebook group for parenting. It's called Redefine Parenting. And I do my Wednesday wisdom. I just did one today on building your kids' self-worth. So, if your listeners want to join me on my Facebook parenting group, all my social media is Venu Inspires. My website's Venu Inspires. So it's very easy to find
Mm,
me.
amazing.
Okay, perfect. So anybody, if you have any comment, or you don't find, okay, I don't see where is Binu and I want to connect with her, you can connect with CJ, with me, and we're going to redirect you with Binu. Thank you very much, Binu. Today was amazing. I really enjoy every minute, and thank you for putting this as a priority for us. It was amazing, really. And we are looking forward to really connecting more with you and knowing how to help more people, really, because that is the key behind this. What is the belief system that you have right now that maybe is the one that is creating all the problems? You can change it just with curiosity, and I love that. It's
Mm,
really amazing, just talking about curiosity instead of being critical. And that is, I am the first guy that is always saying, like, I am critical even with myself. Start to be
Curious.
curious about yourself, like even with yourself, like, okay, what is happening here, are the things that I'm doing. So I really love it. Thank you for being
Thanks,
here,
Coach.
everybody that was here with us, listening in the TV or wherever you were listening. Thank you very much for being here with us, and see you next week. CJ, thank you.
thank you, Vinu. Really pleasure. So many nuggets today. I took notes, so if I was looking down, I was scribbling. So,
Thank
Yes.
you guys for having me. It's been a
my
blessing.
pleasure.
No, it was completely a blessing. Thank you very much. So this show can be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, for watch it, hear it, read it, download it, leave it. Thank you all.